The cold, silent expanse of space stretched endlessly as a fleet of alien ships cruised towards a small, uncharted planet. The ships were sleek, dark, and built for war. Their mission was clear: investigate a mysterious report of a strange creature causing havoc on a nearby colony. The reports claimed that the creature was enormous, destructive, and nearly unstoppable. Some called it a beast, but the alien commanders were not afraid. They had faced dangerous threats before and dealt with them swiftly. As the fleet descended through the thick atmosphere of the planet, the crew on board the lead ship gathered around the large windows, gazing down at the surface below. The planet was covered in thick forests, jagged mountains, and vast deserts. It was beautiful, but the beauty was now overshadowed by the deadly unknown. Landing on the outskirts of a destroyed human settlement, the aliens quickly suited up in their advanced combat gear, their weapons ready. The city was in ruins, with signs of a violent struggle. Crushed buildings, burned-out vehicles, and scattered debris were all that remained. This was not a creature of mindless destruction. It was something smarter, something dangerous. The leader of the alien soldiers, General Korak, surveyed the scene. "This creature doesn't just destroy, it hunts," he said, his voice cold and calculating. His soldiers moved with precision, their scanners scanning the area for any signs of movement. They were experienced, and they knew how to handle such situations. The beast, whatever it was, would be easy to track. Hours passed, and still no sign of the creature. The team moved deeper into the ruins, weapons raised and alert. Then, out of nowhere, the ground beneath their feet began to shake. A low growl echoed in the distance. The soldiers froze, their eyes wide with shock. Something was coming, and it was coming fast. Suddenly, from the shadows of a broken skyscraper, the creature emerged. It was huge, towering over the soldiers. Its body was covered in thick, matted fur, its claws long and sharp. It had the appearance of a wild animal, but its eyes were too intelligent, too calculating. The alien soldiers hesitated for only a moment before they opened fire. Laser beams and explosive rounds lit up the night as the soldiers launched their attack. The creature roared, its massive form taking the full brunt of the assault. Its fur began to burn and singe, but the creature didn't stop. It kept charging forward. The soldiers fought back with everything they had, but it seemed like the more they shot, the angrier it got. General Korak shouted commands, urging his soldiers to switch tactics. "Flank it! Trap it from all sides!" But the beast was too fast, dodging their attacks with ease and continuing to push forward. As the battle raged on, it became clear that the creature wasn't just tough. It was something else. It was using tactics, anticipating their moves, and adapting. One by one, the soldiers' weapons malfunctioned, their communication systems jammed. The creature seemed to know exactly how to disrupt their technology, and it attacked with relentless precision. In a desperate move, General Korak ordered the use of their most powerful weapon, a high-powered energy beam capable of disintegrating anything in its path. They aimed it directly at the creature. The beam hit with a deafening crack, exploding in a blinding flash of light. When the smoke cleared, the beast was gone. For a moment, there was silence. The soldiers stood still, breathing heavily, processing what had just happened. General Korak's face was a mask of disbelief. He couldn't believe it was over. They had destroyed it. They had won, or so they thought. As the soldiers began to regroup, something caught their attention. In the clearing, where the creature had fallen, there was a strange object. It wasn't a part of the beast. It was something else. The soldiers carefully approached it, their weapons still raised. It was a small, shiny metal object about the size of a fist. There were markings on it, symbols that the soldiers didn't recognize. General Korak picked it up, feeling a sense of unease settle in his stomach. "What is this?" he muttered, examining it closely. He turned it over in his hands, noticing that the markings seemed familiar, like an ancient language. It looked too advanced to be part of a simple creature. "This doesn't belong here," he said quietly. "We've made a mistake." Just then, one of the soldiers noticed something else. Scattered around the area were pieces of armor. They weren't alien. They were human. The creature they had destroyed. Was it really just an animal, or was it something more? The question hung heavy in the air, and with it came a growing sense of dread. As Korak and his team prepared to descend into the planet's depths, they couldn't help but feel a creeping sense of dread. The truth was out there, hidden below the surface, and it was only a matter of time before they would have to face it. The deeper they ventured into the planet's core, the darker it became. The underground tunnel system was vast, stretching for miles beneath the surface. The air was thick with dust, and the walls seemed to pulse with an ancient energy. The soldiers moved in complete silence, their footsteps echoing through the darkened passageways. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing strange markings on the walls, symbols that seemed familiar but still unrecognizable. General Korak led the way, his eyes sharp as he surveyed the path ahead. His mind was racing. What had they uncovered? What was buried down here? He had been so sure of their mission, but now doubts were creeping into his mind. The creature they had destroyed, the human armor, it all pointed to something much larger, something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Finally, after what seemed like hours, they reached a massive underground chamber. The room was filled with strange machines, each one connected by a network of glowing wires and pipes. In the center of the room, there was a large, cylindrical structure covered in more of the strange symbols they had seen earlier. The atmosphere was thick, heavy with the weight of secrets long buried. Korak stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the power emanating from the structure. It was as if the very walls were alive, watching them. He motioned for his team to spread out, examining the machines and the symbols on the walls. Lieutenant Vora approached the cylindrical structure cautiously, her fingers tracing the symbols etched into its surface. "These markings, they're similar to the ones we found on the armor," she said, her voice filled with disbelief. This is human technology, but it's not from any time we know. It's ancient." Korak felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just some abandoned human outpost. It was something far older, something that had been hidden away for a reason. As Vora continued to study the structure, she activated a small console next to it. The machines around them hummed to life, and the cylindrical structure began to glow with a faint blue light. A loud mechanical whirring echoed through the chamber as the walls shifted, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, there was a series of chambers, each one holding a figure in stasis. The figures inside the chambers were unlike anything Korak had ever seen. They were human, but their bodies had been altered. Their muscles were more defined, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. They looked like soldiers, but not just ordinary soldiers. These were super soldiers, engineered for war. They were the same kind of warriors that the creature had been, but in a more advanced form. They were experiments, Korak murmured, staring at the figures in shock. Humans. They created these soldiers for something far beyond normal warfare. Vora looked at him, her face pale. But why? Why would they create something like this? What was the purpose? Before Korak could answer, a voice suddenly echoed in their minds. It wasn't spoken aloud, but it was clear, unmistakable. "You should not have come here." The voice was deep, powerful, and seemed to vibrate through the very air around them. Korak's heart raced as the chamber began to shake. The machines hummed louder, and the figures in the stasis pods started to stir. "They're waking up," Vora whispered, her voice shaking. We've triggered something we shouldn't have." Korak felt a wave of fear wash over him. The creatures they had encountered on the surface, the super soldiers, they had been just the beginning. The real threat was right here in this underground chamber. The truth was finally clear. Humans had been experimenting with dangerous weapons, creating soldiers who were more powerful than any of their enemies could ever imagine. But these soldiers weren't just weapons. They were part of something far more dangerous. A legacy of war, of destruction, of a power that had been buried for centuries. The chamber seemed to pulse with energy, and the stasis pods began to open. The soldiers inside stepped out, their eyes glowing, their movements fast and precise. They were waking up, and they were not happy. "We've made a terrible mistake," Korak said, his voice low and tense. He knew they were facing something far beyond their control. The super soldiers, now awake, were more than just warriors. They were living weapons, and they were about to unleash chaos on the planet. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the soldiers gathered in formation, their eyes locking on Korak and his team. It was clear that the battle had only just begun. The real war, the one the humans had prepared for centuries, was about to erupt, and the aliens were in the middle of it. Korak raised his weapon, but deep down, he knew there was no way they could fight these soldiers. They were not just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their lives. The soldiers stood frozen, staring at the super soldiers as they slowly emerged from their stasis pods. The air was thick with tension, and the ground seemed to vibrate with the power that these ancient warriors possessed. General Korak's heart raced, his hand gripping his weapon tightly, though he knew deep down that their weapons might not be enough. These weren't just soldiers. They were a legacy of humanity's darkest past, a force that had been buried for centuries, now waking up to a world that wasn't ready for them. The super soldiers moved with precision, their glowing eyes scanning the room. Their movements were fluid, almost inhuman. They were faster, stronger, and more skilled than any warriors Korak had ever encountered. It was as if they had been programmed for battle, each one perfectly designed for war. They didn't look like the humans Korak had seen in old records. These soldiers had been altered, enhanced. Their bodies were stronger, faster, and more deadly. The leader of the group, a towering figure, stepped forward. His eyes glowed with an intense blue light, and his voice echoed in Korak's mind, not spoken aloud but felt in the very core of his being. "Who dares disturb our slumber?" The voice was cold, powerful, and full of authority. Korak swallowed hard, his body stiff with fear. He knew the soldiers weren't just awake, they were angry. These were not the type of beings who could be reasoned with. They were soldiers bred for war, and war was all they knew. He stepped forward cautiously, his voice steady but filled with the weight of the moment. We did not come to disturb you. We were investigating the creatures on the surface. We didn't know." The soldier's eyes narrowed as he studied Korak. "You are not worthy of our explanation." He raised his hand and the ground trembled again. The air around them crackled with energy, a sign of the immense power the soldiers controlled. Korak's mind raced. This wasn't just a simple discovery. It was an awakening of something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. These soldiers were part of a human experiment, something that had been buried for a reason. The planet, the technology, everything they had uncovered, had all been hidden away by humanity itself. But why? What had they been preparing for? Before Korak could speak again, the soldier raised a hand and the chamber went silent. "We are humanity's legacy. We were created for one purpose, to ensure that no enemy could ever defeat them. We were their final weapon, their last line of defense." Korak's mind struggled to comprehend what he was hearing. These soldiers had been designed to protect humanity, but now that they were awake, they were a force to be reckoned with. They were not just soldiers, they were weapons of mass destruction, and they had been dormant for far too long. The general's voice broke through the silence. "But what happened? Why were you put to sleep? What went wrong?" The leader of the super soldiers turned his head slightly, his eyes glowing even brighter now. "Humanity feared what they had created. We were too powerful, too dangerous. They locked us away deep beneath the surface so that we could never be used against them." The weight of his words hit Korak like a punch to the gut. Humanity had feared their own creation. These warriors, these super soldiers, had been too dangerous to exist in the world. But now they were awake, and the fear they once felt had turned into something far worse. These soldiers were angry, betrayed by the very species they had been made to protect.